Welcome to the latest Intelligence podcast. In this episode, we'll explore how the not-for-profit sector increases its cybersecurity posture. The cybersecurity attacks on high street well-known brands Marks and Spencer's, followed by the Cooperative and Harrods, got the attention of the public, and from what I hear, CIOs and CEOs sat up too. So much so, the issue became front and centre of a major BBC Panorama documentary series. This attention, though initially unwelcome, is actually a bonus for technology leaders, especially those in the not-for-profit sector. To discuss this, I'm joined by a seasoned not-for-profit CIO, Kevin Antao. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Mark. Hi.
Not only the size of the attacks, but the enormity of the brands of Marks and Spencer and the Cooperative got that attention of business leaders and the general public. For the not-for-profit sector, brand is also incredibly important. Some charities have as big a brand consciousness as those well-known retailers. That surely has to focus the minds of charity leaders. Would you agree?
I mean, it has. I think it probably not only with the not-for-profit sector, but just across the board. These were enormously damaging attacks over the last couple of weeks and months that we've seen, and also quite simple attacks, as they seem to always be in industry. So for the not-for-profit sector, it's raising real big questions. I think in the boardroom, lots of organisations are thinking, crumbs, if I had a ransom, what would I do in that situation? What would we do as an organisation? And that's a really frequent question that's coming up in executive and boardroom conversations, and therefore it's a bit of an opportunity for non-profit leaders in the IT or cybersecurity space to get some points across as well.
And the not-for-profit sector is always limited by its resources, and from what peers of yours tell me, they're seeing a real spike in demand at the moment due to obviously the political nature and the economic nature of the world we're living in at the moment. That means cybersecurity may not be seen as central to the mission. Is that something you're seeing and organisations struggle with?
Yeah, 100%. These are really unprecedented times in the sector. As is well documented, we have a cost of living crisis, we have threats to non-profit organisations across the globe, extraordinary news events that we read about all the time, and a real the demand for services for the sector, particularly around the missions that they serve, has never been higher. Throw in a digital revolution that is underway, AI and other disruptive technologies that are coming forward. It means that on a very long to-do list, if you add in cybersecurity as well, it's a real challenge for the sector leaders. But I do think that's an opportunity as well. I think on the back of that, if a non-profit leader that can actually align cybersecurity to those many challenges that are out there and tell a story, and maybe that's something we can talk to a little bit more later on. I think that's a real opportunity within the sector. And
without wishing to speak ill of the sector and its people, the current environment means that the not-for-profit sector needs to professionalise in order not to become the next M&S. Or am I being too harsh?
The word professionalise is quite a word that brings quite a lot of feeling in the non-profit sector, and there's a hell of a lot of extraordinary professionals doing professional activity, often taking on 3 professions or 4 professions of jobs. So the word professionalise is always a difficult one, I know, for colleagues. But if you relate it to professional standards, if I think about the government's recent publication of the cyber governance codes and codes of practice, particularly around the cyber assessment framework that is now becoming a standard that I would say is mandatory for various industries across the UK and the UK's infrastructure, It really means that the charities in the non-profit sector, we've really got to adopt that standard and be very rigorous in our application against that standard. So if we're talking about professionalising the sense of adhering to particular standards and guidelines, then yes, I think that's really important.
I think you raise a really interesting point there, that because an organisation is largely voluntary, doesn't mean to say it's unprofessional. And actually, professionalism is, as you say, is often a set of the rules of the game, as it were, and that's the opportunity. By the sound, what you're saying is cybersecurity needs to be part of the not-for-profit rules of the game.
I mean, I'm a trustee at a charity. We are very much held to account by bodies like the Charity Commission and what obligations that we have, and they're no less professional than a commercial organisation. So it really, professionalisation is a really important aspect.
That's great. In the past, you've spoken of the importance of engaging with and forming strong partnerships with the exec team within a not-for-profit. But more importantly, you talk of how that needs to use positive language about the brand, about its values when discussing cybersecurity. Explain a bit more about, unpack that for us a bit, please.
Yeah, excuse me, great question. I think positive language and positive relationships as well. I suppose the start of that question was about the exec team. And when I think about the people that you need to engage with, particularly on the topic of cybersecurity, I do start with the board and the trustees, because cybersecurity means so many different things to different people, and you've got to form different partnerships across the landscape of the leadership and staff and stakeholders that you have at your organisation. Trustees often have a very personal experience. Many trustees on non-profit boards come from for-profit boards or for-profit backgrounds or other professions. So they have might have a very personal experience around cybersecurity. So you've got to spend some time, take some time with them to understand their situation. I think the CEO, so CEO impersonation is so rampant that's out there. So if I think of spear phishing or whaling, where you've got these long-term targeted attacks of CEOs, people trying to impersonate them, it's often a case that you've got to spend some time with the CEO, and actually this is where the professional and personal boundary can get a little bit blurred. So you may have to sort of step into certain spaces. These are high profile figures, so you've got to, I'd really recommend doing things like a digital footprint exercise to understand what is this person's persona in the public eye, in order to keep someone like that safe. There are other relationships, I think, with the exec team, the CFO. There'll be really, fraud, and unfortunately the attacks that happen on people doing the accounts in organisations. So, that's a whole conversation in its own right. The Chief People Officer, or CHRO, I suppose after COVID, we had this wonderful moment where the CIO and the Chief People Officer almost talked about as being the power couple after COVID-19 to keep organisations up and running. But cybersecurity to HR professionals is a really strategic consideration now about keeping people safe and secure. So it's another partnership that you need to form. So I think this and others, these are really strong partnerships, and I think it's about talking about cybersecurity in a more hooked to the mission and positive way, and not only just focusing on the fines and the penalties and the dangers of it. Good cybersecurity means a good mission, and I think it's really important of how you convey that as a leader, and try to not just concentrate on fear mongering, but also present a balanced view of why good cybersecurity is good for your mission and why you should try to follow it.
That's a big transition for the role, isn't it? Because in work I've done in the past, I've written reports that have very much shown that the cybersecurity department is the department that says no, that doesn't understand, that is non-aligned to the business, doesn't understand what revenues and all the rest of it are being driven, and suddenly we're talking about a very relationship-driven, front forward organisation. It's a huge change.
It's a huge shift, but I think it's an area that's not been. It's a bit unlocked. I would argue at the moment when we tend to talk about things like data privacy and GDPR and things like under regulatory or compliance outcomes. And unfortunately, people have a natural tendency to potentially switch off when they hear those things. And actually, I was involved in a human rights organisation. We forget that legislation is there to protect people. It's good human rights work. And for charities and for missions that we're working on, so good cybersecurity is good citizenship. It's a real form and basis for it. So it does shift the nature of the language, but it's important to include that when you talk about the subject.
It's fantastic. Language and storytelling keep coming back, don't they, as being vital. You mentioned earlier the simplicity of the attacks. Industry observers of those two big retail attacks have expressed overall, particularly Marks and Spencer's and Co-op, had good basic cybersecurity, yet the attackers found, from what I can read, tiny weaknesses in the basics, and that has wrought havoc. Always worth reminding ourselves what those basics are. What would you say the basics are that every IT leader, whatever the sector, but particularly in not-for-profit, must focus on?
Yeah, and you can easily go online and get a list almost as a checklist of the top 7, the top 8 things of what you should do. I think before I say some of them, I think there's an attitude that non-profit leaders really need to have, and you have to almost obsess about these points. You have to become completely obsessive because, as per your question, these attacks were really simple. They were really basic things and basic defences, which that's why you need that obsessive behaviour. So think about, there's lots of them, right? There's access controls, there's having good kind of cyber education programs. There's things around software and patching and things of what you need to do. There's backups and disaster recovery. There's data protection and work that you need to do there. In the non-profit sector, standards, I think we talked about earlier, but also cyber insurance and making sure you have good policies and well understood policies. And backups. So there's a long list. My sense on that is, focus on a couple of them, like access control. Have you really got a good line of sight of who's got access to what? Is there any sensitive data that's restricted that you've got a good control on it? And is everything under single sign-on or multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication? Have you got sets of controls at the device and those kind of spaces? I think the other thing is, disaster recovery and backups are often thought of as quite a dry topic to talk about. But my word, there is so much if you've actually practiced one. You've actually, and I think when I think about the co-ops use case as well, you've actually taken down your environment or ecosystem and brought it back up and practiced that and had confidence and got learnings from that exercise. It's such a simple thing. But a really vital thing in order of what you're doing. And I'm talking to a lot of charities at the moment about having a cybersecurity practice that question that we were raising earlier around what if I was in a ransomware situation? Yeah, what would you do? Practice with your leadership team. If anything, there's nothing to do on the technical side. It's more the crisis management and human side of what you've got to practice. And I do think the last thing on this is the standards. In the non-profit sector, what I'm seeing is most organisations are trying to accredit to 3 standards, really: Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, and ISO 27001. And that a combination of those things in the UK context particularly gives you probably enough of the basics of what you need as a baseline. Even that's not good enough. You still need to do some proactive things, but that to me feels like a minimum standard.
It's a great point about the recovery. And the last time we met with Intelligence, they were telling us about how it took over a year to get a transport provider back up online after a significant attack, which is, that's a long time for your services and your brand to be tarnished, isn't it? And as the world is changing, and we're looking at the deployment of technologies like Copilot, we're hearing from organisations how they use a champions method to promote the use of this technology to change the way they work. And I meet CIOs from all verticals, and they're increasingly using this champions method. But I don't hear a huge amount about having cybersecurity champions who are out there who are not the cybersecurity or not the IT team, as these change champions are. Is that something that we should be looking to do, particularly in not-for-profit, where, as we said at the top of the conversation, resources are stretched?
Yeah, so it does exist, and it's a really vital muscle for a non-profit, particularly a non-profit IT leader. Building a sense of community. The great thing about the mission and having a let's call it a cybersecurity network program is you can actually almost build a community that are like defenders of the mission or defenders of the organization. So you've created this sense of guardianship, right? This is, I talk a lot about, in technology, people, process, and platforms or technology, right? The 3 Ps. But we're people first, I think, is the most important thing. And I think that the human firewall is probably the most important part of any control that you've got over and above some of the technical controls. But it's wonderful if you can get that community fostered that are looking out for this, the engaged and interested parties that are trying to defend the organisation. And similarly, I mean, let's face it, a lot of non-profit IT teams are quite short-staffed. So it's great having a group of people who can help you out. I think the other thing is a lot of non-profit organisations have their theory of change or the mission that they're trying to serve means that there's a lot of advocacy, there's a lot of researchers, there's a lot of skilled professionals who are actually more qualified in the cybersecurity space than some of the people that have to sort of deal with it on a day-to-day basis, because they're really deep into the research and the threats and what's going on. So that community network, we talked about a cyber education program earlier on. If you can get those individuals delivering your cybersecurity training, it isn't half a lot more effective than an IT leader doing the course or telling people what to do. I think you'll find you'll get your staff turnout will go up, and your actual feedback from those programs are really powerful. So yes, get the guardianship campaign running across your internal staff.
I really like that term, the human firewall. And in many ways, what you've just said should be easier, because every time I deal with a not-for-profit, just about everyone is there because they care about the cause. Whereas a champions network, important in an enterprise, everyone always knows that ultimately we're there to deliver shareholder value and don't always feel that we're getting much value as employees out of that. Would that be true, that that should be easier in a not-for-profit because people care about the cause?
I mean, community building and capacity building is often the case of what we can do. You can actually take it out a little bit further than your internal group. Believe it or not, you can rely on ethical hackers and external activists that are who care. So when you think about your supporters or your volunteers, there are some skilled individuals that sit around your organisation that can help you with cybersecurity. You've got to be a bit careful about how you engage with those people. You don't want to be, especially with bug bounty hunters, you don't want to end up paying a $100,000 reward for a vulnerability that you found. You've got to navigate that. But you've got that, as well as, let's face it, there's lots of well-meaning individuals in industry as well who want to come and help you on these things. It's important just to say on this, cybersecurity is not a topic that you do alone or something that you do not collaboratively. It is a collaboration game, and you should really reach out and get those bits of help.
That's a great point, and we've seen that well, it's part of the not-for-profit, but very related sector. The attack that happened on the British Library. I was told, I was chatting to the Royal Opera and Ballet Company, and they were saying actually that's fostered in the arts not-for-profit sector an incredible wealth of collaboration that they just kind of got out of practice at it, I suppose would be the best way to say it. So as we're here now talking about the most recent attack that fortunately wasn't in not-for-profit, we should be using that to get our sector talking much more, so we don't have what M&S and Co-op have been through.
Yeah, I just on that, I can't. The amount of times that we pore over the events that have occurred in order to find our own vulnerabilities and weaknesses, particularly with the British Library, as well as the recent retail attacks as well, to just understand where the holes are. It actually brings a sort of separate point. It's quite hard sometimes to. People don't really want to talk about events, those who are affected by it as well. So back to that collaboration point, it's really good coming to particularly like charity, IT leader bodies, coming together and talking. It's important that you do that to understand what's the nature of those events and what are the things that I've got to defend against.
That's another great point. That's something I see. So obviously most of my work is journalism, and people don't want to do their dirty washing in the open. But actually on cybersecurity, we kind of do need to front up to that, don't we? And as you say, talk about it in industry forums, but also come to the press so that, Marks and Spencer has been very open with the press about what happened, and that's benefited everyone. I mean, and my colleagues have reported on that, and the networks you and I both live within, we've seen how people have really responded and sent those articles and those insights from M&S beyond their organisation, beyond their IT team, right up to the leadership team, haven't they?
100%.
And related to that, digitisation is not a one and done. It's a continual process. We've learned that now. Digital transformation is a continuation, not a project. It strikes me cybersecurity is the same. There's no completion date on cybersecurity. It has to become part of everyday operations. But so if we get to that point, you've mentioned through this conversation the importance of preparing and practicing for the worst event. How do you bring those two together?
I mean, you're absolutely right. We're in this, and you use the term digitization, digital transformation. 3 separate strands of things that are affecting us. I think you've got to start. Okay, with cybersecurity, you have to start somewhere. I tend to advise with a lot of charities I've been through that initial maturity assessment that you might conduct, and you can get a lot of this done for free. You hear about things like penetration tests and other free assessments which suppliers are willing to do for you. So do start, take a measure, right? You have to understand your as-is situation and allow that as an honest assessment, right? You have to be open in that and get some help to do it. And then you've got to make that part of the dynamic, the day-to-day dynamic. And I think from that measure often comes a plan. And that plan, so what might happen is you'll get a score and it will say 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5. It won't be great probably in terms of the score that you get back from an assessment on this. So that's the moment to develop that plan of how we're going to get to 3 and 4, and why do we need to get to 3 and 4, actually. I've been with a lot of non-profits as to say, well, is 3 good enough for where we need to get to? And then, try to have that cybersecurity moment at all of these important executive moments or board meetings or whatever as an ongoing piece, and measure yourself against that and show yourself. You can show yourself graphically how you're improving along that line. So building it into the psyche. I think the other part is the people part that we mentioned earlier in developing the human firewall. That partnership with the chief people officer, that bit around culture. A good culture is proactively where your staff members are going, crumbs, I got this email and it looked a little bit suspicious. I don't know what it was about, so I've reported it or I've done that. that's when the culture shifts, and developing that takes a long time. So build those plans with your people professionals and others as well.
And on that collaboration piece, how important is it to look beyond the sector, work with something like a managed service provider, because they will have a roster of clients, many non-profit, but also every other vertical market, and you can learn from that. How does that help?
I mean, I'm a big fan of curiosity in all walks of life, but in cybersecurity, you really do need to look way beyond your own sector in terms of learnings. I mean, the suppliers are really good as a source for you. We're really lucky here in the UK. We've got some extraordinary materials and capabilities provided by UK government, such as the NCSC, the National Centre for Cybersecurity, the various agencies that we have with lots and lots of materials. I mean, we have to remember cybersecurity it's called a young industry for some reason. We had antivirus in the 80s, we had firewalls in the 90s, we had big cybersecurity events in the start of 2000. So, it's about as old as me in generous terms, but it is still young, it's still fledgling. But there's a whole bank and wealth of events, information, things that you can plug into. Charity IT leaders to put a plug out there, another community that you can come and be involved in and find out about these things. So I think there's enormous amount out there you can get out from this.
So accepting that cybersecurity and digital transformations are continuals, the other term that has become sort of accepted narrative now is a cybersecurity attack is not if, but when. So as a digital leader in a not-for-profit, how do you prepare for that worst when?
It's such a great conversation, and actually we go further than that. We say it's happening now in your organisation. You just might not know about it. So that level of preparedness is really important. Practice. It's so important here. There are some amazing things that you can do and amazing tools that can help you mimic an event or take forward an event. I mean, a lot of the cyber education comes with phishing simulations or phishing exercises, and many organisations are running that exercise 2 or 3 times a year, if not more, almost like on a very frequent basis. So that's one small factor of practice. Number 2, I think, is a tabletop exercise. There's some really, that question that we were talking about earlier on around ransomware. What would we do in a ransom situation if our particular data has gone? And I think there's some amazing tools out there that you can use. I think in the non-profit sector, a lot of people rely on the NCSC's. It's like an exercise in a box. It's a toolkit that you can use. But also organisations such as Intelligence and working with Sophos, there's a number of tabletop exercise materials about how you do an executive simulation of an event. And I think in the case of Co-op and others, this really helped them by doing that and knowing what to do in the case of an event. And the third part is the human part. Go and speak to people that have been involved in real events. I've had the fortune and misfortune of being involved in, a number of mailbox compromises where external infrastructures were stood up, and all of a sudden it's not about your internal infrastructure, it's how do I stop an external infrastructure that looks like me sending emails to all of my supporters. Or, when we're trying to protect high-profile individuals, particularly, for example, senior female staff, when an attacker is doing a really targeted attack on female members of your executive leadership team, had to defend against that. There are these lots and lots of different stories that I think going out and talking to people and say, well, what did you do in that situation? How did you recover from it? What protections did you put in? What were the most effective protections? Go out with that spirit of curiosity and find out a little bit more about those things.
It's interesting you mentioned Sophos there, and you mentioned that the attack is happening right now. And of course, they published a report, didn't they, about an attack from a nation state that was ongoing for over 5 years, I think it was, which I think you can find on their website and is worth reading.
Yeah.
And related to that, nation states, it doesn't feel, being completely ignorant, it doesn't feel, why would a nation state pick on a not-for-profit? But then, of course, not-for-profits can be an organisation you were involved in, Amnesty International, but how much is nation state an issue for the not-for-profit sector?
I mean, the way it's spoken about, these are cyber criminals that are they're funded potentially by particular nation states, and a lot of it, actually you can get this inflated view where non-profits go, no, they're attacking us because of the nature of what we do, and that's absolutely not the case. They're attacking because they can. It's really quite, you need to kind of come down off your pedestal a little bit on that, in that situation, and go, it's because they can, because they're indiscriminate in the nature of a lot of the attacks. But you mentioned Sophos, and they published the Pacific Rim event as well. And that is similar to some of the experiences I've had, where you've got some of these attacks have been going on for years, multiples of years. I know in my situation, we discovered an attacker operating with privileged access inside of an ecosystem for multiples of years. And particularly if you're a mission-based organisation running annual campaigns or running things with your supporters, that can be really debilitating, because you suddenly reflect on, crumbs, what over the last 3 years, what have I done that might have compromised or negated the effect of the very good cause of what we're trying to do. So, and it does feel a little bit like watching the movies here. The sad reality is this is true. Unfortunately, these attackers, and also the romantic images that the media present of these individuals, versus the reality of the 16-year-olds that are sitting in a bedroom in wherever across any country around the world, and because they can, it's alarmingly different. So you have to be really vigilant on this, and it's happening. Treat it as it's probably happening to me now. That's a really good attitude to take. How am I going to assert my ecosystem so that I am confident to say why it's not happening? It's almost like a reverse way of protecting yourself.
That point you made there about they're attacking you because they can rather than who you are is that reverts back to your point about the need to collaborate, isn't it? Because if they're attacking 3 of our most well-known retailers, they're also attacking you, and we're mistakenly thinking they're doing it because Co-op and Harrods and M&S are fantastic brands, and so are the not-for-profit organisations. But actually, the brand value is nothing to them. It's just a way of, it's an activity they do almost.
But there is something for the non-profit sector. I think Microsoft have published some research some time ago that we keep quoting, that it's like a sector that's the second most attacked sector potentially after the military. And think of the nature of what it is. Well-meaning people giving financial donations to organisations to do good. And unfortunately, that is gold dust to potentially to a cyber criminal mindset for some of the issues that you talked about earlier in terms of resource shortages and lots and lots of demands. So they're attacking because they can, but similarly, there are some attractive returns in this area, and so it's really imperative to be vigilant off the back of that, and particularly the financial line and the financial element, right? I mentioned about the relationship with the CFO, invoice fraud, seen a lot of phishing, but we've seen a lot of, I think what's really prevalent at the moment is vishing, voice phishing, where your CFO is being impersonated to get on a call and suddenly tell someone to pay an invoice in the next hour or so. And unfortunately, people have been caught out from that. It's not the CFO, it is a recording, unfortunately. This is prevalent, and it's prevalent in the non-profit sector.
Kevin Antao, thank you for sharing your insights with us. A really interesting discussion, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Thank you.